Well, it's been quite a long time since the last set of Spirits Are Forever With You tie-in characters were released in the mobile game Bleach Brave Souls, the better part of an entire year in fact. But now the time has come and brand new quote-unquote Beyond Bankai forms have been released for another group of popular characters as part of the ongoing collaboration with the light novels. The characters to get these new forms this time are the captains Toshiro Hitsugaya, Kaname Tosen, and Seijin KOMAMURA, the latter of which's form I have been really looking forward to seeing. Firstly though, I want to apologise for the lateness of this video. I usually try and get these Brave Souls analysis videos out around the time the characters are revealed, or at the very latest when they are released in the game, but unfortunately this year I was still trying to catch up with everything I had to release over the Christmas period, so I really appreciate you bearing with me on that. But as we always do with these Beyond Bankai analysis videos, we'll take a look at these brand new designs, bearing in mind of course that they aren't canon, they really are just for fun as part of the promotion being run in the mobile game, but they're always really awesome to take a look at. I generally think the designs themselves are fantastic, and they are often overseen by Kubo himself as well, which does lend some credit to the designs in general. But as always, we'll be taking a look at these designs one by one to see if we can't find any cool details or little references in them to the actual characters and the source material itself. Before we get started on the video, guys, if you haven't hit subscribe yet, make sure to do that now for more Bleach content like this every single week. And if you enjoyed the video, make sure to give it a thumbs up as well to help support me and the channel. And if you want to take that support for me another step further, I do also have a Patreon as well. And as always, I want to give a massive shout out and a huge thank you to everyone who is over there on Patreon supporting me and the channel. I really do appreciate each and every one of you. And before we dive into this video as well, I just want to say that there will probably be spoilers for the 1000-Year Blood War arc of Bleach ahead. So we've actually done a fair few of these videos at this point now, as I believe this Spirits Are Forever With You Beyond Bankai promotion, this tie-in collaboration, is at least somewhat nearing its end. I believe the only captains to not have received these new forms yet that are supposed to be getting them are Gin Ichimaru and Mayuri Kurotsuchi, both of which should hopefully also look absolutely fantastic. But yeah, like I said, we've amassed quite the catalogue of these analysis videos now, going as far back as when Byakuya's Beyond Bankai form was revealed some years ago now at this point, and we've looked at all of them since, including that initial trio of Yamamoto, Shinsui, and Ukitake, right the way through to the two Kenpachi characters, Shinji and Urahara, Soifon and Yoruichi, and it brings us now today to Toshiro, Tosen, and KOMAMURA. Now let's begin with Toshiro Hitsugaya's new Beyond Bankai form, as of the three of these new designs, this one is probably the weakest overall in my opinion. Certainly it's my least favourite of the three of them, but that being said, I still think it's a very strong look overall and a great evolution of Toshiro's original Bankai design. Now, probably the most striking element of the design are the new splashes of crimson that have been added throughout, particularly on the massive lotus petals that hang suspended above him. The petals themselves have also become more ornate, with seemingly an additional layer of petals added to them, much in the same way as Hyorinmaru's own guard seemingly doubles in layers upon going from Shikai to Bankai. But the crimson colour here attributed to Hitsugaya throughout this entire design is a reference to the English translation of the name Daiguren Hyorinmaru, which becomes Grand Crimson Lotus Ice Ring, also referenced by the chapter titles The Perfect Crimson, during which he reveals his completed Bankai. Now, while Hitsugaya's Bankai has always transformed both his arms and his legs into those of ice dragons, the transformation goes even further here than it did before. The armoured vest that Hitsugaya is now wearing is a reference to Hyorinmaru's own underbelly, which we can see very clearly here when Hitsugaya hollow-fires himself and regains his Bankai against Kangdu. Not only that, but Hitsugaya has now also gained icy horns as well, again somewhat resembling his hollow-fired state. Hitsugaya's Bankai wings are also noticeably smaller and skinnier here as well, while being more numerous than in his original Bankai, bearing a closer, though not exact, resemblance to how his wings manifest in his adult form, which we only see very, very briefly. Also seemingly riffing on his adult completed Bankai form as well, when Hitsugaya enters that form, several parts of his clothing become covered in ice. From his shoulder pads to the end of his coat, they are all draped in a hardened, icy shell. A similar thing happens in this form as well. Hitsugaya gains these almost icy gauntlets on the top side of his sleeves, and the base of his Hayori is also coated in ice crystals as well. Now, when activating his special ability in this new form, Hitsugaya summons a towering rise of flower buds and turns his blade totally crimson before all of these buds suddenly bloom into powerful spiked flowers that deal the enemy an incredible amount of damage. Hitsugaya Zanpakuto, and his Bankai in particular, has always carried a visual theme of flowers and of blossoming and blooming flowers, particularly with abilities like Hyoten Hyakoso, which is themed entirely around this idea of a pillar of blossoming ice flowers. And this is very much the same. It carries that same core idea that when these flowers bloom, the enemy dies. But as far as I'm concerned, that's mostly everything about this new form for Hitsugaya. I do think it looks really cool, but compared to the other two, it doesn't do quite as much for me. But moving on to Kaname Tosen, the captain turned traitor who didn't want to die assimilated as part of this organization that he deemed to be unjust, being the Soul Society. Kaname has an amazing design here, and I also don't think anyone would have complained if this had been what his Resurrection had looked like in the source material itself. Much like Shinji's design, however many months ago that was, this design contains elements from both Tosen's Shinigami and Hollow powers. But what's cool here is, unlike Shinji's design, which seemed to feature those powers in slightly more harmonized balance, it was almost more of a half and half situation, Tosen's design is almost totally dominated by his Hollow side, with very little left to resemble his Shinigami self. In terms of his Shinigami powers, they're represented by the rings running along his arms, reflecting his Bankai and its initiation ritual. An interesting difference here, however, is that the rings now have spikes protruding from them where they didn't before, perhaps to show the corruption of Tosen's soul. In regards to his Shinigami powers, however, that's pretty much it, but even then, the rings themselves could easily be a reference to his ultimate Hollow ability, Los Nuevos Aspectos. Everything else in this design is a reference to Tosen's hollowification. The helmet he now wears is a combination of his bug-like head in Resurrection, but bearing the twisted horns that emerged from his Resurrection's back, now smaller and on his head instead. Where those gigantic black horns in his release form once had chains drooping from them and disconnected from anything, there's now only one chain connecting the two horns upon his head, perhaps to show that his power is now complete. Tosen's monstrous, black, hairy, insect-like legs and arms are of course a reference to his Resurrection Gria Grigio, as are the fly-like wings protruding from his lower half. His eyes are the same colour here as they are when opened in his release form, that kind of glass-like, glossy emerald green, perhaps implying that his sight has returned here once again. Although Tosen's face isn't obscured here, he is still wearing the same hollowification armour on his torso he did before, just minus the mask. In fact, his design simply resembles that of his Arankar arc look, way more than his Soul Society arc version, from his long, free-flowing hair to the orange bands around his waist. Tosen's base attack in the game seems to be a mixture of his Shinigami and Hollow powers, as he swaps between attacking with a purple set of claws and the spiked rings. The green of his Reiatsu in this form seems to be a reference to his Sero, while his ultimate special ability combines that with the rings to replicate both the activation of his Bankai with the rings spinning around him to enclose him, and then the power of Los Nuevos Aspectos forming behind him to generate these gigantic, almost shockwave-like rings. And so yeah, I'll be honest, I really love Tosen's design here. I think they've done something great with this character, bringing together his disparate forms in a way that I think is honestly more effective than Shinji's was beforehand. And this is coming from someone who actually quite likes Tosen's Resurrection. I know that Griar Grigio is not overly popular, but I've always thought it looked pretty cool, aside from maybe the face region. Everything else I always thought looked and worked really well, and I think this has kind of condensed it down into something that is more, shall we say, conventionally cooler, but I do still think it works really, really well, and Tosen probably looks maybe the coolest he ever has here. I really do think it works extremely well. That being said, my favourite design is yet to come. Probably my favourite of the three, and one of my favourite Beyond Bankai designs in general. KOMAMURA'S design is simple, and I think that is what makes it work so very well. It's fierce and powerful, and of course what immediately stands out in this form is that he has become the warrior himself, the warrior that Kokujo Tengen Myo is, and is even wearing some of its armour, specifically on his shoulders and across his back. KOMAMURA has, perhaps in the most direct way possible, become his Bankai. Honestly, this was always pretty obviously going to be the route they were going to go down for KOMAMURA. When you have a gigantic suit of armour as your Bankai, and you want to then fuse the character with their Zanpakuto, it's a pretty clear-cut route to go down. I myself even designed a form very similar to this, where he fuses with his Zanpakuto and wears its armour 8 years ago. So it was pretty obvious this was always going to be the route they chose, and I'm very glad they did. Now, KOMAMURA'S actual design itself seems to be borrowing heavily from Tenken's overall look in the Zanpakuto Rebellion arc. KOMAMURA'S bright red fur seems to be a reference to Tenken's red skin, which his Bankai does bear in the source material, but it's never been quite as obvious as it was in the anime. And then there's the fire that KOMAMURA is breathing, and his long flowing mane is also trickling off into flames as well. It's possible this is a reference to Yamamoto and his Bankai, but more so than that, I think again it feels like they are referencing the Tenken design of the Zanpakuto Rebellion arc, as that version of Tenken not only utilised fire attacks, something we never saw from KOMAMURA even once in the source material, but also went even as far as to breathe fire himself. It's also possible that this version of Seijin is a direct reference to his Bankai's ultimate form, Dangai Joy, stripped of its armour, revealing its reddish-orange skin beneath, and the flames flickering from KOMAMURA'S mouth are the same as those coming from Dangai Joy's eyes. In this extremely imposing and powerful form, KOMAMURA is wielding Tenken's own blade here, most commonly seen when he uses Bankai. That giant warrior wields a sword of its own, and that is the blade that this version of KOMAMURA is holding, to make it even clearer that he has taken the form of his Bankai but now condensed it down to his own size. KOMAMURA now also bears the black ropes of ruination on his back, and while I'm not sure they're connected in any way whatsoever, his new shoulder pad, which we can see clearly in the concept art for these designs, looks remarkably similar in a way to the pad he wears across the gaping hole in his chest in his human form. But a perhaps more clear and direct homage is the way KOMAMURA is now wearing his Shihakusho, which is quite clearly in direct reference to the former head captain himself, Yamamoto, when he used to decide to take things pretty seriously. But when he activates his ultimate ability, KOMAMURA becomes, more literally than ever, that raging, flaming titan, growing to the size of his Bankai, and so becoming Kokujo Tengen Myo in the truest form possible. So yeah, KOMAMURA'S design is a total win as far as I'm concerned. I like that they kept it mostly pretty simplistic, only to add things that help make KOMAMURA look more intimidating than ever. This now burnished red fur covering his entire body, the massive, gigantic black shoulder pads of his Bankai look so very good here, and really I just think this form of KOMAMURA works so well. I'd have loved to have seen it incorporated into his character somehow in the canon story itself. But that's it for the latest set of Beyond Bankai characters. Of course, as I said at the beginning of these videos, these characters aren't canon, these forms aren't canon. They are just for fun, but they do look extremely good most of the time, I think. These are some of the cleanest designs Bleach Brave Souls has ever output, and really, if there was any value in keeping Brave Souls around, it's the fact that it continuously gives us awesome original content like this that we otherwise probably would never have gotten. So, let me know in the comments below which of these three designs is your favourite. Mine is KOMAMURA'S, then Tosen's, then Hitsugaya's, but I think they all look pretty great in their own right. Another question I want to pose to you guys is this: with the last two characters getting this supposed Beyond Bankai treatment being Gin and Mayuri, what is the next thing you would like to see from Brave Souls? I've seen people mentioning Beyond Volstendig, I've seen people mentioning Beyond Fullbring. I really don't have a clue what could be next. Presumably they're going to want to do something because these are big money spinners for the game. But yeah, I absolutely love looking at these characters each time they are released, and I can't wait for Gin and Mayuri. Mayuri in particular better look absolutely crazy. But that's it for the video, guys. I really hope you enjoyed it. Let me know in the comments below, like I said, which is your favourite of the three of these. Make sure to hit subscribe if you haven't done already, and until then, I'll catch you later. I'll see you then.